The shot took less than a second. The silence that followed lasted forever. General Mara Okon stood on the marble floor of the Grand Assembly, her hands empty, her weapon still holstered, when the plasma bolt burned through her chest. She did not fall right away. She looked down at the hole in her uniform, then up at the golden throne where the Emperor of the Vitiatriki sat, and she smiled. It was a small smile, a human smile, the kind that says, "You just made the biggest mistake in 900 years." Then she dropped to her knees, and the whole galaxy held its breath. Around her, 10,000 delegates from 100 worlds froze in horror. The Vitiatriki guards, tall and gray with 4 arms and eyes like black glass, lowered their rifles too late. The human delegation screamed. And high above, floating in the great crystal dome of the assembly, the peace stone cracked with a sound like breaking bone. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Because everyone in that room knew what General Okon knew in her final moment. The war was coming back. To understand why one dead human woman could shatter a peace that had held for 9 centuries, you have to go back. Not to the day she died, but to the day humanity first crawled out of its little corner of the stars and met the galaxy that had been waiting and laughing for a very long time. Humans were late. That was the first thing everyone said about them. The galaxy had been full of civilizations for over 1,000,000 years. The Vitiatriki Empire alone was 300,000 years old. They had colonized 4 spiral arms. They had bent stars into cages and turned black holes into engines. When humans finally built their first slow, clumsy jump drive and stumbled into deep space, they found a party that had been going on for longer than their species had existed. And the galaxy looked at these small, soft, short-lived creatures, and it was not impressed. Humans lived only 80 or 90 years. The Vitiatriki lived 4,000. The Selani lived 12,000. The floating gas mines of Ophrys did not die at all. Humans had no natural weapons. No claws, no armor, no venom. They could not see in the dark. They could not survive in space without machines. They broke easily, bled easily, and grieved so hard it seemed to hurt their own bodies. The galaxy gave humanity a nickname in those early years. In the trade tongue, it was Shaveth. It meant, roughly, the ones who won't last. Nobody expected humans to matter. But there was one thing the galaxy did not understand about humans, and it would take them 900 years to learn it. It was not strength. It was not speed. It was not even courage, though humans had plenty of that. It was that humans remembered. The story of the peace begins with a war, and the war begins with a mistake. 200 years after first contact, humanity was a minor power. They held 1 star system and a handful of colonies. They traded ore and strange art, and a spice the aliens found addictive. Mostly, the big powers ignored them. But the biggest power of all, the Vitiatriki Empire, was hungry. It always was. The Vitiatriki believed the galaxy was theirs by right. They had a word for it, Torval, which meant the natural order. In their belief, the universe was a ladder, and every species had a rung. The Vitiatriki stood at the top. Everyone else stood below, and the lower you stood, the less your life was worth. The Vitiatriki looked at the human worlds, small and rich and weak, and they saw an easy meal. The Empire sent a fleet. Not a big one, because they did not think they needed a big one. 40 warships, each one larger than a human city. Each one crewed by soldiers who had trained for longer than human civilization had existed. The Vitiatriki admiral, a cold and ancient creature named Varenkai, sent a single message to Earth before he arrived. "Kneel," he said, "and you may live as our servants. Stand, and you will be erased. You have 1 rotation of your world to decide." The humans did something the Vitiatriki did not expect. They laughed. Not all of them. Many were afraid, and rightly so. But the human leader at the time, a woman named President Ada Fawn, stood before the cameras of her whole world and said 7 words that would echo across the stars for centuries. We were not asking for your permission. The Battle of the Kuiper Line was the first time the galaxy learned what humans were. The Treaties came in expecting a slaughter, and for the first hour, that is exactly what they got. Human ships were smaller, slower, and weaker. They died by the dozen. The Treaties laughed on their command decks and marked the humans down as Shaveth, just as everyone had said. But the humans did not run. That was the first surprise. Every species the Treaties had ever fought ran when the killing started. It was the same thing to do. You saved your ships, your soldiers, your future. You lived to fight another day. Humans did not run. They pressed forward into the fire, and when their ships were dying, they did the thing that would haunt Treaties nightmares for 900 years. They rammed. A human captain named Idris Volkov flew his broken, burning ship straight into the heart of the Treaties flagship. He could have escaped. His engines still worked. But he chose the collision, and his crew chose it with him, every single one, because they knew what it would do. The flagship broke in half. Admiral Varenkai died screaming, unable to understand why a creature would trade its one short life for a single enemy ship. To the Treaties, it made no sense. Their lives were long and precious. You did not spend 4,000 years of life to kill one enemy. It was madness. To the humans, it was not madness. It was arithmetic. 1 life for 1,000. 1 ship for a fleet. 1 human family's grief against the survival of a whole species. They had done the math, and they had chosen, and they kept choosing. Ship after ship, captain after captain. When the humans ran out of warships, they strapped engines to cargo haulers and rammed those too. When they ran out of haulers, they took mining charges into the enemy hulls in tiny 1-person pods. The Treaties fleet, 40 warships strong, watched in growing horror as this small, soft, short-lived species threw itself into the grinder and refused, absolutely refused, to break. By the end of the 3rd day, the Treaties fleet had lost 31 ships. The humans had lost nearly everything. But the 9 surviving Treaties ships turned and fled, and that was the important part. The galaxy had never seen the Treaties run before. The war did not end at the Kuiper Line. It only began. For the next 100 years, the Treaties and the humans fought across a dozen star systems. The Empire, humiliated, sent bigger fleets. The humans, growing stronger, met them. And slowly, painfully, the rest of the galaxy began to understand something that changed everything. Humans were not strong. They were not fast. They did not live long. But they had 2 things no other species had in the same measure, and those 2 things made them the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. The first was that humans would not stop. Every other species fought until the cost got too high, and then they made peace, because that was the logical thing to do. Humans did not do this. When you hurt a human, the human remembered. When you killed a human's family, the human did not forgive, and did not forget, and did not stop, not in a year, not in a decade, not in a lifetime. And because humans passed their memories to their children, and their children to their children, a human grudge could outlive the person who started it. The Treaties learned this the hard way. They destroyed a human colony called New Kansas, killing 3 million people. They thought it would break human morale. Instead, the humans carved the name New Kansas into the hull of every warship they built for the next 200 years, and every one of those ships fought like it had something to avenge, because it did. The second thing humans had was harder to name. The Selani called it the warmth. The gas mines of Offerus called it the binding. Humans just called it love. Humans did not fight only for themselves. They fought for each other. A human soldier would die for a stranger from another human city they had never met, simply because that stranger was human. They pulled their wounded from the battlefield when it made no tactical sense. They mourned their dead with songs and stones and stories. And this binding, this warmth, made human units almost impossible to break. You could kill a human, but you could not make a human abandon another human. Not the good ones. And in war, the good ones were the ones who fought hardest. The galaxy watched, and the galaxy began to feel something it had not felt in a million years. Fear. The other great powers held a secret council. The Selani, the Offerin gas mines, the crystal people of Dren, the insect hives of Kal. They met on a neutral moon, and they asked each other one question. What do we do about the humans? Some wanted to destroy them before they grew too strong. But the Selani ambassador, an ancient and wise being named Thrinity who counts the stars, spoke against it. You cannot destroy them, she said. The Vtraki have tried for a century. Every human you kill makes 10 more who will never forgive you. They do not surrender. They do not forget. If we make war on them, we make war forever. She paused, her long silver limbs folding in thought. And there is another thing. A thing that frightens me more than their anger. What is it? Asked the Crystal Lord of Dren. They are getting stronger, said Thrinity. Faster than any species I have ever recorded. When we met them, they could barely leave their own star. 200 years later, they build ships that fight the Vtraki to a standstill. A human lives only 90 years, and yet they learn faster than a Selani who lives 12,000. Do you understand what this means? Their short lives are not a weakness. They are a weapon. Every generation throws away the old ways and invents new ones. They do not get stuck. They do not get comfortable. They change and change and change, and we cannot keep up. The council was quiet for a long time. Then we do not fight them, said the Crystal Lord at last. We make peace with them. We bring them into the order before they surpass us all. And so the great powers went to the Vtraki, who were exhausted and bleeding from 100 years of war, and they proposed something that had never been done before. A galactic peace. A treaty to bind every major power, humans included, into a single order that could never war against itself. The Vtraki, too proud to ask for peace themselves, but too tired to refuse it, agreed. The humans agreed too. They were tired of dying. They had a saying, born from all that war. We fight so that our children won't have to. Peace was the whole point. It was what all the ramming and the burning and the grief had been for. The treaty was signed on the neutral world of Concord, in a great white assembly built for the purpose. And at the center of the assembly, the powers placed a wonder. It was called the Peace Stone. It was a crystal grown by the Drenish, keyed to the life force of every signing species. As long as the peace held, it would glow with a soft, warm light. If any signatory broke the peace by spilling the blood of another inside the halls of the assembly, the stone would crack, and the treaty would be void, and the galaxy would know that war had returned. It was a symbol. Everyone knew it was only a symbol. In 900 years, no one ever thought it would actually break. The humans signed last. Their representative, a quiet old man named Sephuokon, pressed his hand to the stone, and the crystal drank a drop of his blood, and it glowed. He was the first of a long line. The Okon family would serve the peace for 9 generations. It was in their blood, quite literally. The last of that line was General Mara Okon, and she was the one who would break it. 900 years passed. The peace held, but it was never easy. The Vtraki never truly accepted it. In their hearts, they still believed in Torval, the natural order, with themselves at the top and the humans as upstart animals who had gotten lucky. They obeyed the treaty because they had to, not because they believed in it. And they waited. The Vtraki were patient. They lived 4,000 years. They could afford to wait for the right moment. The humans, meanwhile, had become something new. They were no longer a minor power. 9 centuries of peace, of trade, of learning, had turned them into one of the great civilizations of the galaxy. Their worlds numbered in the hundreds. Their fleets were vast. But more than that, they had become the glue of the galaxy. Humans were everywhere, doing the things no one else wanted to do. They were the mediators, the traders, the healers, the ones who went to the dangerous frontier worlds and made them livable. When 2 ancient species had a grudge too old to solve, they sent for a human. When a colony was dying and no one else would help, humans came. The other species had a new name for them now. Not Shaveth, the ones who won't last. Now they called humans Veth-Shah, which meant, roughly, the ones who stay. At the center of it all stood the Okon family, keepers of the peace for 9 generations. And the finest of them all was General Mara Okon. She was 62 years old, with gray in her dark hair and lines around her eyes from a lifetime of squinting at star charts and hard decisions. She had spent 40 years in the human fleet, rising from a frightened cadet to the supreme commander of all human forces. She had fought pirates on the frontier and negotiated peace between species older than her whole civilization. She had lost her husband to a raider attack 30 years ago and never remarried, pouring all her love instead into her work and into her one child, a daughter named Zara. Mara Okon believed in the peace with her whole heart. She had seen war on the frontier, the small wars the treaty did not cover, and she hated it. She hated the waste, the grief, the way it turned children into weapons. She had made it her life's work to make sure the Great War never came back. That was why she was on Concord that day. That was why she stood in the Grand Assembly, beneath the glowing peace stone, in front of the golden throne of the Galactic Emperor. She was there to stop a war. She did not know she was about to start one. It began with a signal. 3 weeks before General Okon died, a human science vessel called the Wanderer was mapping a dead region of space at the far edge of the galaxy, a place no one ever went, when it picked up something impossible. A signal, old, faint, and buried under 900 years of cosmic dust. But it was not natural, and it was not any known language. The Wanderer's AI ran it through every database in human space, and found nothing. Then it ran it through the ancient archives, the ones humanity had bought and traded from the older species over the centuries. It found one match, a single word, in a language so old that even the Selani had nearly forgotten it. The word was Veltor. It meant the ones before. The captain of the Wanderer, a young woman named Lieutenant Priya Sundaram, did not understand what she had found. But she knew it was important. She followed the signal. It led her deeper into the dead zone, past cold, dead stars and the wrecks of ships older than any species alive. And at last, orbiting a black and burned-out sun, she found the source. It was a station, or it had been, once. Now it was a graveyard, a vast ring of dark metal 1,000 miles across, silent and dead for uncounted ages. And on its side, in letters a mile high, was written that same word, Veltor. Lieutenant Sundaram sent her report to the human government, and the human government did something it had not done in a very long time. It panicked, because in the deepest, most secret human archives, there was one other reference to the Veltor. It came from the very first years of contact, from a dying Selani historian who had sold humanity his life's research for a fortune in spice. The story was this. Long ago, before any of the current species existed, the galaxy had been ruled by the Veltor, the ones before. They were the first great civilization, and they were mighty beyond imagining. But they were also cruel. Then, one day, the Veltor vanished. All of them, And the dying Selani historian had told humanity one last thing, the thing that made the human government panic when they read the report from the Wanderer. He had said, the Vtraki did not invent Torval, the natural order. They inherited it. They learned it. From the Veltor. The Vtraki are not the first empire, human. They are the students of the first empire. And the students have never stopped waiting for their teachers to come home. The signal from the dead station was not just old. It was active, it had turned on. Something in that graveyard had woken up. And it was calling home. General Mara Okon read the report in her quarters aboard the human flagship HFY. And for the first time in many years, she felt truly afraid. She understood at once what it meant. If the Veltor were returning, the galaxy was in terrible danger. But there was a second danger, one that frightened her nearly as much. The Vtraki. For 900 years, the Vtraki had obeyed the peace because they had no choice. But if their old masters were coming back, if the ones before were returning to reclaim the natural order, then the Vtraki would have a choice. They could break the peace, side with the returning masters, and take back the top of the ladder that they believed was theirs by right. And if the Vtraki broke the peace, the Great War would come back, and this time it would be humanity and a handful of tired old species against the Empire and the most powerful civilization that had ever existed. Mara Okon knew she had to act fast. She had to reach the Vtraki Emperor before the Emperor learned about the signal on his own. She had to convince him that the peace was worth keeping, that whatever the Veltor had been, the galaxy of today did not need masters. She had to hold the treaty together with her bare hands. She called her daughter before she left. Zara Okon was 30 years old, a diplomat like her mother, stationed on a frontier world. Her face appeared on the screen, tired and kind, so much like her father's that it still hurt Mara to look at her. "You're going to Concord," Zara said. It was not a question. She knew her mother. "I have to," Mara said. "You've read the report." "I've read it." Zara was quiet for a moment. "Mom, don't go alone. The Vtraki have never forgiven us. If they think their masters are coming back, they'll be looking for an excuse. You could be walking into a trap." "That's exactly why I have to go alone," Mara said gently. "If I bring a fleet, they'll see it as a threat. Peace isn't made with fleets, sweetheart. It's made with two people in a room, looking each other in the eye. I taught you that." "You did." Zara's eyes were wet. "I hate it when you use my own lessons against me." Mara laughed, and it was a real laugh, warm and full. "I love you, Zara. Whatever happens, remember that the peace is worth it. Everything we've built, everything your great-great-grandparents bled for. It's worth keeping, even if it costs us." "Mom, I have to go. I'll call you when it's done." She never called. The Grand Assembly on Concord was the most beautiful building in the galaxy. It rose from a white plain like a mountain made of light, its walls of living crystal changing color with the movement of the sun. Inside, 10,000 delegates from 100 worlds sat in a vast bowl of tiered seats, and at the center floated the peace stone, glowing its soft and steady warmth, as it had for 900 years. General Mara Okon walked into that hall alone, in her simple gray uniform, and every eye turned to watch her. The Vtraki Emperor waited on his golden throne. His name was Kelvarak the Undying, and he was the oldest living being in the galaxy, more than 3,900 years old. He had been alive when the peace was signed. He remembered the war. He remembered his people's shame. And he had spent 9 centuries waiting for the day he could wash that shame away. He was tall even for a Vtraki, gray as old iron, his 4 arms folded, his black glass eyes fixed on the human as she approached. Around him stood his honor guard, 12 warriors in silver armor, each one armed with a plasma lance. Mara stopped at the foot of the throne. She did not kneel. Humans never kneeled to the Tetrarchy, and it had always galled them. Emperor Kelvarak, she said, thank you for meeting with me. General Okon. His voice was deep and cold, like wind in a cave. You come alone. That is either very brave or very foolish. I come in peace, Mara said. I think you know why I'm here. I know. The Emperor's eyes glittered. You have found the signal. The one from the dead station at the edge of the galaxy. The one that says Veltor. Mara's heart sank. He already knew. That meant she was too late to control the story. She would have to try something else. Then you know what it means, she said. The ones before may be returning. That is a danger to all of us. To your people and mine alike. We need to stand together. We need to keep the peace, now more than ever. The Emperor was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had changed. It was softer, almost gentle, and that frightened Mara more than his coldness had. You misunderstand, General, he said. The Veltor are not a danger to my people. They are our salvation. The whole hall went silent. For 900 years, the Emperor said, rising slowly from his throne, my people have lived under a lie. The lie that all species are equal. The lie of your treaty. But there is a truth older than your treaty, older than your species, older than the stars you were born under. There is a natural order, a ladder of worth, and the Veltor built that ladder. They put my people near the top and yours near the bottom, where you belong. Emperor, Mara started. They are coming home, Kelvarak said, and now his voice rose, filling the great hall. The masters are coming home to set the order right. And when they come, they will remember who kept the faith and who did not. My people will greet them as loyal students. And your people, human, will finally take the place you were always meant to hold. Beneath us, where you belong. Mara Okon stood very still. She understood now. There was no talking him out of this. He had made his choice long ago. He had been waiting 900 years for this exact day. But she was General Mara Okon, ninth of her line, keeper of the peace. And she would not give it up without a fight. You're wrong, she said, and her voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the hall. About the ladder. About the natural order. About all of it. There is no natural order, Emperor. There is only what we choose. 900 years ago, my ancestors chose to build something better than a ladder. We built a table, a round one, where every species has a seat. It wasn't easy. It cost us millions of lives. But we built it, and it held, because it was true. And you can call your masters home if you want. You can kneel to them, and put us beneath you, and pretend the ladder is real. She lifted her chin. But you'll be kneeling alone. Because we will never kneel. We didn't kneel to you 900 years ago, and we won't kneel to the Veltor now. You should know that better than anyone. You were there. The Emperor stared at her, and in his ancient eyes, something flickered. It was not doubt. It was memory. He had been there. He had seen the humans ram their ships into his fleet. He had seen a creature trade its one short life to kill his admiral. He knew, deep down, that Mara Okon was telling the truth. Humans would never kneel. And that truth enraged him, because it meant that even when the masters returned, even when the natural order was restored, the humans would defy it. They would spoil the perfect ladder with their stubbornness and their warmth and their refusal to break. They would ruin everything, as they always had. He could not allow it. You are right about one thing, General, the Emperor said softly. You will never kneel. He raised one gray hand. So you will die standing. And he gestured to his honor guard. Mara Okon had 1/2 second to understand what was about to happen. In that 1/2 second, 1,000 thoughts could have crossed her mind. Fear, anger, the face of her daughter, the long line of Okons who had kept the peace. But what she thought, in that final 1/2 second, was something else entirely. She thought, asterisk if he does this here, in this hall, in front of 10,000 witnesses, beneath the peace stone itself, then the treaty is void, and the whole galaxy will know he broke it. He is making the greatest mistake of his very long life. And he doesn't even see it. Asterisk. That is why she smiled. The plasma lance fired. The bolt took her through the chest. She looked down at the wound, then up at the Emperor, and she gave him that small, terrible, human smile. The smile that said, "You just lost." Then she fell to her knees, and above her, the peace stone cracked with a sound like breaking bone. The 900-year peace was over. The recording of General Mara Okon's death reached every human world within a day. The assembly had cameras. There was no hiding it, and the treaties did not try. The Emperor wanted the galaxy to see. He wanted them to understand that the old order was returning and that resistance was pointless. He broadcast the killing across 100 worlds as a warning. It was not received as a warning. On Earth, in the great cities, people gathered in the streets and watched the recording on giant screens, and they wept, and then they went silent, and the silence was worse than any scream. On the frontier worlds, human colonists stopped their work and stood still. On the fleet bases, soldiers watched their general die and did not move for a long time. And then, all across human space, from the oldest cities of Earth to the smallest frontier outpost, the same words began to spread. No one ordered it. No one planned it. It rose up from the people themselves, the way it always had, the thing that made humans the most dangerous species in the galaxy. They remembered. They dug up the old words, the ones from the very first war, 900 years gone. The words President Ada Fun had said to Admiral Varenkai before the Battle of the Kuiper Line. And they wrote those words on their ships, and their walls, and their hearts. We were not asking for your permission. The Galactic Empire had made the same mistake twice, 900 years apart. They had looked at humanity and seen something soft, something that would break. And once again, they had lit a fire they could not put out. Zara Okon watched her mother die on a screen in a small office on a frontier world. She did not weep. Not then. She sat very still, and she watched it 3 times, and then she stood up and walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Her mother's last words rang in her head. Asterisk, the peace is worth keeping, even if it costs us. Asterisk. Her mother had believed that. Her mother had died for it. And now the peace was broken, and the woman who had spent her whole life protecting it was gone, and the galaxy was tipping toward a war it had not seen in 900 years. Zara Okon was the last of her line. The 9th generation was over. She was the 10th, and there was no one after her. She thought about hiding. She thought about running to some quiet corner of the galaxy and letting the great powers fight it out. She was a diplomat, not a soldier. She had never held a weapon in her life. What could she do? Then she thought about her mother's smile, the one she had given the Emperor in her last half-second of life. Zara had seen it on the recording, and she understood it because she was her mother's daughter, and she knew that smile. Her mother had not smiled because she was giving up. Her mother had smiled because she had won. The Emperor had broken the peace in front of 10,000 witnesses, beneath the peace stone itself. He thought he was declaring the return of the old order. But what he had actually done was unite the whole galaxy against him. Every species that had signed the treaty had just watched the treaties murder a peacemaker in cold blood. Every species that had feared the return of the Veltor now had a reason to fight it, and a martyr to fight for. Mara Okon had turned her own death into a weapon. It was the most human thing she had ever done. Zara wiped her eyes, and for the first time, she wept. Then she stopped weeping, and she picked up her communicator, and she began to make calls. If the galaxy was going to war, someone had to hold the round table together. Her mother had built it. Her family had kept it for 9 generations. And Zara Okon was not going to let it fall apart now. The great powers met on the neutral moon of Seraph, the same place they had met 900 years before to decide what to do about the humans. But the mood was very different now. The Selani came, led by an ancient being who traced her line back to Threnody counts the stars. The offering gas mines came, drifting in their pressure tanks. The crystal people of Dren came, and the insect hives of Kal, and a dozen other species. And the humans came, led by Zara Okon, 30 years old, with no title and no fleet, only her mother's name and her mother's cause. The council was in chaos. The Vtriki have declared for the Veltor, said the Selani ambassador. They are massing their fleets. Their emperor claims the ones before will return within the year, and when they do, the Vtriki will fight beside them to restore the old order. We cannot stand against both. The Veltor alone could destroy us all. With the Vtriki beside them, we have no hope. Then we make terms, said the Crystal Lord of Dren. We submit. Better to live as servants than to die as free peoples. You would kneel? Zara Okon's voice cut across the council. Every eye turned to her. She was the youngest being in the room by thousands of years, and she was human, and she was afraid, but she stood up anyway. You would kneel to masters you have never even seen, she said. The Veltor have been gone for 1,000,000 years. You don't even know if they're real. You don't know if they're coming. All you have is one old signal and one emperor's mad hope. And on the strength of that, you'd throw away everything? You'd throw away 900 years of peace, of the round table, of a galaxy where every species has a seat. She looked around the room. My mother died for that table. My family has kept it for 9 generations. And I am telling you, it is worth fighting for. Even if we lose. Even if it costs us everything. Brave words, human, said the Crystal Lord. But bravery does not win wars against gods. No, Zara admitted. It doesn't. But I don't think we should fight the Veltor with fleets at all. She took a breath. I think we should find them first. And I think we should ask them a question. The council fell silent. What question? Said the Selani ambassador. Zara Okon looked at the ancient beings around her, and she said the thing that had been growing in her mind since she watched her mother die. Why did they leave? The plan was madness. Everyone said so. But Zara Okon had inherited more than her mother's cause. She had inherited her mother's stubbornness, and her mother's gift for seeing the thing that everyone else missed. Her reasoning was this. 900 years ago, the galaxy had feared humanity and chosen to make peace instead of war, because war with humans was a war without end. What if the same logic applied to the Veltor? What if the ones before had not been destroyed and had not simply left? What if something had happened to them? Something that no one remembered, something buried under 1,000,000 years of dust. The signal had said Veltor. The dead station had woken up and begun to call. But what if it was not calling the masters home to conquer? What if it was calling for help? What if the greatest empire the galaxy had ever known had not vanished in triumph, but in tragedy? There was only one way to find out. Someone had to go to the dead station and learn the truth. And that someone, Zara decided, was going to be her. Because she was the last of the Okons, and the peace was her family's burden, and she would not send anyone else to die in her place. She took a single ship, the same one her mother's science vessel had used to find the station in the first place, the Wanderer, with its young captain Priya Sundaram, who volunteered to fly Zara into the dead zone even though it might mean her death. Priya had lost people in the frontier wars. She understood the human thing, the binding, the warmth. She would not let Zara go alone. They flew for 2 weeks through the dead zone, past cold stars and ancient wrecks, until they reached the black burned-out sun and the vast dark ring of the station, 1,000 miles across, with the word Veltor written on its side in letters a mile high. And as they approached, the signal changed. For 900 years, It had repeated the same message. Asterisk Veltor. Veltor. The ones before. Asterisk, but as the wanderer drew near, the station seemed to sense them, and the message shifted, and Priya's AI translated the new words, and they were not what anyone expected. The new message said, Asterisk, you came back. You finally came back. Please, help us. We have been alone so long. Asterisk. Zara Okon felt a chill run down her spine. That's not a conqueror's message, Priya whispered. No, said Zara. It's not. She stared at the vast, dark ring, at the letters a mile high, at the graveyard of the greatest empire that had ever lived. It's a distress call. They docked at the ancient station, and they went inside, and what they found there changed everything. The station was a tomb. That much was clear at once. The halls were vast, built for beings much larger than humans, with high vaulted ceilings and doorways like the mouths of caves. And everywhere, were the dead. Not bones, for the Veltor did not have bones as humans understood them, but shapes, husks, the dried and ancient remains of a species that had died 1,000,000 years ago, frozen in the moment of their ending. And their ending had been terrible. Zara could see it in the way they lay. They had not died in battle. They had not died in triumph. They had died reaching for each other. Whole families, curled together. Parents shielding children. Friends holding hands. Or whatever the Veltor had used for hands. They had died together, holding on to each other in the dark. What happened to them? Priya whispered. The station answered. As they walked deeper into the tomb, the ancient systems woke around them, sensing living beings for the first time in 1,000,000 years. Screens flickered to life. Voices, long dead, played from the walls. And slowly, piece by piece, the truth of the Veltor was revealed. They had been mighty. They had ruled the galaxy. And they had believed in Torval, the natural order, the ladder of worth, exactly as the Vttraki believed now. They had put themselves at the top and all other species below, and they had used those lesser species as slaves and playthings and fuel. But that was not what killed them. What killed them was a plague, a sickness that came out of the deep dark, from beyond the galaxy's edge, and swept through the Veltor like fire through dry grass. It did not touch the lesser species. Only the Veltor, only the masters, and it killed them by the billions. And here was the terrible thing, the thing that made Zara Okon sink to her knees in the dark. When the plague came, the Veltor turned to the lesser species for help. The slaves, the servants, the ones they had ruled for 1,000,000 years. They begged for help. And the lesser species looked at their dying masters, the ones who had enslaved them and used them and treated them as less than nothing, and the lesser species did the logical thing. They walked away. They let the Veltor die, not out of cruelty, but out of cold arithmetic. Why should the slaves save the masters who had spent 1,000,000 years grinding them into dust? There was no love between them. There was no binding. There was no warmth. There was only the ladder, and when the top of the ladder began to fall, the lower rungs simply stepped aside and let it fall. The Veltor died alone. All of them. Across the whole galaxy. Not because they were weak, but because in 1,000,000 years of ruling, they had never given anyone a single reason to save them. They had built a galaxy of ladders, and when they needed a hand to pull them up, there was no one who cared enough to reach down. This station was their last refuge. The final survivors had gathered here, at the edge of the galaxy, and they had built a signal, and they had sent it out into the dark, begging anyone at all, to come and help them. No one came. They died waiting. And the signal kept playing for 1,000,000 years into the empty dark, long after the last of them was gone. Asterisk Veltor. Veltor, please, help us. We have been alone so long. Asterisk. That was the great secret. That was the truth buried under 1,000,000 years of dust. The ones before were not coming back to conquer. They had not left in triumph. They had died, abandoned and alone, killed not by any enemy, but by their own belief in the latter. Their empire had been so cruel, so cold, so utterly without warmth, that when the end came, not one single soul in the whole galaxy loved them enough to save them. And the HFY, their loyal students, were about to make the same mistake. They were building the same ladder. They had just murdered a peacemaker to prove their loyalty to masters who were already a million years dead. They were kneeling to a corpse. Zara Okon knelt in the tomb of the ones before, surrounded by the husks of a species that had died reaching for each other too late, and she understood, at last, the full meaning of her mother's smile. The humans had won the first war not because they were strong, but because they were bound to each other. Because when a human fell, another human reached down. Because they had built a table instead of a ladder. And that binding, that warmth, that refusal to leave each other behind, was the one thing the greatest empire in history had never had. It was the only thing that mattered. It was the only thing that had ever mattered. Zara Okon took everything. The records, the images, the final messages of the dying Veltor. She loaded it all onto the Wanderer, and she and Priya flew out of the dead zone as fast as their engines could carry them, because she knew that time was running out. The HFY Emperor was massing his fleets. The great powers were on the edge of surrender. The galaxy was about to tip into a war or a submission that would destroy everything her family had built. And Zara held in her hands the one thing that could stop it. The truth. But the truth alone would not be enough. Zara knew that. The Emperor would not believe it. He had waited 900 years for his masters to return. He would not give up that dream because a human girl showed him some old recordings. He would call it a lie, a human trick, and he would go to war anyway. She needed something more. She needed a way to make him see. And as the Wanderer flew home through the dark, Zara Okon began to form a plan. It was a terrible plan. It was dangerous, and it might cost her everything, just as her mother's plan had cost her everything. But she was her mother's daughter, and she understood now that some things were worth the cost. The peace was worth keeping, even if it cost her. The HFY fleet gathered above the dead station. The signal had not gone unnoticed. The Emperor Kelvarak, in his mad devotion, had sent his greatest fleet to the edge of the galaxy to greet the returning masters. 3,000 warships, the mightiest armada the HFY had assembled in 900 years, hung in the dark around the ancient ring, waiting for the ones before to wake. And on his flagship, the Emperor waited too, on a throne he had brought from Concord, dreaming of the moment his masters would rise from their long sleep and reward his loyalty. Into that fleet, alone and unarmed, flew a single small ship, the Wanderer. Zara Okon transmitted a message on every channel. Emperor Kelvarak, this is Zara Okon, daughter of Mara Okon, whom you murdered. I have been inside the station. I know the truth about the Veltor. Before you begin your war, before you kneel to your masters, I ask you to let me show you what I found. Grant me that, and if you still wish to fight, I will not stop you. I could not stop you anyway. I have one ship and no weapons. I ask only that you look at the truth before you throw the galaxy into fire. The HFY could have destroyed her in an instant. 3,000 warships against one small vessel. But the Emperor was curious, and he was arrogant, and he wanted the human girl to see the return of the masters with her own eyes so that she would understand, at last, that her mother had died for nothing. Bring her aboard, he said. They brought Zara Okon before the golden throne, in the same simple gray uniform her mother had worn, and she stood before the Emperor exactly as her mother had stood, and she did not kneel. You have your mother's spine, Kelvarak said. A pity. She had it too, and look where it brought her. I've been inside the station, Zara said. I know what happened to the Veltor. And when you know it too, Emperor, everything you believe is going to fall apart. Nothing you say will change the natural order, the Emperor said. The Masters are coming home. I have waited 900 years for this day. Then let me show you what you've been waiting for, said Zara. And she began to play the records. At first, the Emperor watched with contempt. He saw the vast halls of the station, the high ceilings built for the mighty Veltor, and he swelled with pride. You see, he said, the Masters, greater than any species alive. This is the natural order, human. This is the top of the ladder. But then the records went deeper. He saw the dead, the husks, the families curled together, the parents shielding children, the friends holding hands in the dark, and the pride began to drain from his ancient face. He heard the final messages, the begging, the distress call that had played into the empty dark for 1,000,000 years. Asterisk, please. Help us. We have been alone so long. Asterisk. No, the Emperor whispered. This is a trick, a human lie. The Masters did not die. They left. They ascended. They died of a plague, Zara said quietly. A sickness that killed only them. And when they were dying, Emperor, they begged the lesser species for help. The slaves, the servants, all the peoples they had ruled and used and ground into the dust for 1,000,000 years. They begged them to save them. And do you know what the lesser species did? The Emperor did not answer. He could not. They walked away, said Zara. They let the Masters die. Every single one of them. Not because they were weak, and not because they couldn't have helped, but because in 1,000,000 years of ruling, the Veltor never gave anyone a single reason to love them. They built a galaxy of ladders, and when they fell off the top, there was no one who cared enough to catch them. She stepped closer to the throne. The greatest empire in history did not die from an enemy, Emperor. It died from being alone. It died because it had no friends. It died because it built ladders instead of tables. And you, her voice broke, just for a moment, thinking of her mother. You are building the same ladder. You just murdered a woman who spent her whole life trying to save the peace, to prove your loyalty to masters who have been dead for 1,000,000 years. You're kneeling to a corpse, Emperor. And if you go to war, if you tear down the round table my mother died for, then one day, when your empire is dying, you'll beg the galaxy for help. And the galaxy will remember what you did today, and it will walk away, just like the slaves walked away from the Veltor. And you will die alone, in the dark, exactly like they did. The great hall was silent. The Emperor Kelvarak, oldest living being in the galaxy, 3,900 years old, stared at the images of the dead masters he had worshipped his whole life. And something in his ancient face broke. Because he saw it. He saw the truth of it. He had built his entire life, his entire empire, his entire belief on the natural order of the Veltor. And the natural order had killed them. It had killed them the surest and cruelest way there is. It had killed them by making sure that when they needed love, there was none to be found. It cannot be, he whispered. But he knew it was. And then the station woke fully. Perhaps it sensed the Vitiatriki fleet. Perhaps it had waited 1,000,000 years for enough living beings to gather near. And now, at last, there were 3,000 ships full of life. Whatever the reason, the ancient ring of the Veltor came alive, and its last, deepest system activated. A system the dying masters had built in their final hours, in their desperate hope that someday, someone would come. A beacon fired from the station. Not a weapon. A message. It burned across the entire galaxy in an instant, faster than any signal had ever traveled, carried on the strange dead science of the ones before. And the message was the last words of a dying empire, the truth they had learned too late, the confession they had sent into the dark in the hope that someone, someday, would learn from their mistake. Every species in the galaxy heard it at once. Humans on Earth, Selene in their star gardens, the gas mines of Ophrys, the insect hives of Kal, and the Treaties on every world of their empire. The message played in every language, in every mind, all at the same time. It said, we were the first. We were the greatest. We ruled the stars for 1,000,000 years, and we believed that strength was everything, and that the strong were meant to rule the weak, and that this was the natural order of all things. We were wrong. A sickness came, and we were strong, but strength did not save us. We called for help, and no one came, because we had never given anyone a reason to come. We had ruled without love. We had taken without giving. We had built a galaxy where every creature stood alone on a ladder, and when we fell, there was no one below us who would reach up, because we had spent 1,000,000 years stepping on their hands. We are dying now, the last of us, and we send this message into the dark so that whoever comes after us will know the one thing we learned too late. The strong do not survive. The loved survive. Build tables, not ladders. Reach down, not just up. Because in the end, when the dark comes for you, and it will come for everyone, the only thing that will save you is whether you gave anyone a reason to save you. We gave no one a reason, and so we die alone. Do better than we did. This is the last word of the Veltor. The message ended, and across the whole galaxy, 100 species stood in silence and understood. On the flagship, the Emperor Kelvarak fell to his knees before his own throne. Not to the Veltor, to the truth. The masters he had worshipped for 900 years had spent their last breath begging the galaxy not to become what he had become. What have I done? He whispered. What have I done? Zara Okon stood over the fallen emperor, and she did not gloat, because she was her mother's daughter, and her mother had never gloated. Instead, she did the most human thing of all. She reached down. She offered the emperor her hand, the hand of a human, of a species he had murdered, a peacemaker to spite, of the daughter of the woman he had killed. She offered it freely, in the tomb of his dead masters, and she said, "It's not too late. That's the difference between you and them, Emperor. They learned the truth when they were already dying. You've learned it while you can still change. So change. Get up. Help me put the table back together. My mother died to save the peace. Don't let her die for nothing." The Emperor Kelvarak looked at the human hand held out to him, the last of the Okons, the 10th generation, the keeper of a peace he had shattered, and the oldest being in the galaxy, who had never in 3,900 years reached up to anyone, reached up now. He took her hand. The war did not happen. The Treaties fleet stood down. The Emperor Kelvarak, changed forever by the truth of the tomb, ordered his ships home, and then he did something no Treaties emperor had ever done. He went to Concord, to the shattered assembly, to the broken peace stone, and he knelt before the whole galaxy and confessed his crime. He confessed the murder of General Mara Okon. He confessed the lie of the natural order. He confessed that his people had spent 900 years worshipping a ladder that had killed the very masters who built it. And he asked, for the first time in the history of his ancient and proud people, for forgiveness. It was not easily given. The humans, most of all, did not forgive easily. They remembered. They always remembered. Mara Okon had a daughter and a people, and a long line of ancestors who had kept the peace for 9 generations, and all of them had watched her die. But here is the thing about humans that the galaxy had learned over 900 years, the thing that made them different from the Veltor and the Treaties, and every empire that had ever built a ladder. Humans remembered their grudges, but they also remembered their forgiveness. And they knew the difference between an enemy who would never change and an enemy who had finally learned. The Veltor had died because no one gave them a chance to be better, and humanity, of all the species in the galaxy, understood that the whole point of the round table, the whole point of the peace, was that everyone got a seat, even the ones who had done terrible things, as long as they were willing to change. Zara Okon spoke for humanity that day. She stood in the broken assembly, beneath the cracked peace stone, and she looked at the emperor who had killed her mother, and she said, "My mother believed the peace was worth keeping, even if it cost her. It cost her everything. It cost me my mother." Her voice shook, but she did not stop. "I could hate you, Emperor. Part of me does. But hate is a ladder too. It's a ladder that only goes down into the dark where the Veltor died alone. And I won't climb it. My mother didn't die so that I could learn to hate. She died so that we could build the table again." She turned to the whole galaxy, to the 100 species watching. "So let's build it. Not because the Emperor deserves a seat, but because that's what the table is for. A ladder is for the ones who earn it. A table is for everyone. That's the whole point. That's what my mother knew. That's what the Veltor learned too late." She looked back at Kelvarak. "Sit down, Emperor. There's a seat for you. There always was." They grew a new peace stone. The Drenish crystal people grew it, keyed once again to the life force of every signing species, humans and Vthraki and Selani and all the rest. But this new stone was different from the old one. The old one had been a warning, a thing that would crack when the peace was broken. The new one was a promise. It was grown around a single object at its heart, sealed forever in the crystal, glowing at the center of the light. It was General Mara Okon's medal, the one she had worn on her chest the day she died. Her family gave it freely, because they understood, as she had understood in her last half-second of life, that some things are worth the cost. And they carved new words into the base of the stone. Not the old words. "We were not asking for your permission," though those words still lived in human hearts. They carved the last words of the Veltor. The truth an empire had died to learn. The truth a human woman had died to prove. Asterisk: the strong do not survive. The loved survive. Build tables, not ladders. Asterisk. The signal from the dead station fell silent at last. Its message had been heard. Its purpose, after 1,000,000 years, was finally complete. The ones before had sent their confession into the dark, hoping someone would learn from it, and someone had. A small, soft, short-lived species that lived only 90 years, that had no claws and no armor and no venom, but that had one thing the greatest empire in history had never possessed: the warmth, the binding, the reaching down, the thing that humans called love. Years later, when Zara Okon was old, with gray in her dark hair and lines around her eyes just like her mother, she brought her own daughter to Concord to see the peace stone. The little girl looked up at the great, glowing crystal, at the metal sealed forever in its heart, at the words carved into its base. And she asked the question that children always ask. Who was she? The general in the middle of the light. Zara Okon knelt down beside her daughter, the 11th of the line, and she thought about how to explain it. How to explain 900 years of peace, and a war that almost was, and a tomb at the edge of the galaxy, and a truth an empire died to learn. How to explain her mother's smile in the last half-second of her life. In the end, she kept it simple, the way the best truths always are. She was your great-grandmother, Zara said. And once, a very powerful empire thought that she was weak. They thought all of us were weak, because we're small, and we don't live very long, and we break easily. She smiled, and it was her mother's smile, warm and full. But they were wrong. They were wrong about the most important thing in the whole galaxy. Do you know what that is? The little girl shook her head. Zara Okon looked up at the metal in the heart of the light, at her mother, who had died standing, so that the galaxy could keep sitting together, and she said the words that would be passed down through her family for as long as there were Okons to remember them. They thought the strongest thing in the universe was a fist, she said softly. But it isn't. The strongest thing in the universe is a hand, reaching down in the dark, to someone who thought they were alone. That's what she knew. That's what she died for. And that's why, 1,000 years from now, when everyone who ever built a ladder is dust and forgotten, they'll still remember her name. And in the heart of the crystal, in the center of the warm and steady light that had not flickered since the day the Emperor took her hand, General Mara Okon's metal glowed on, as it would glow for 1,000 years, and 1,000 more, over a galaxy that had finally learned to reach down. The strong do not survive. The loved survive. And humanity, small and soft and short-lived, taught the whole galaxy how to love.